Welcome to the Saturday Spotlight, where we go through all the games on a Saturday and discuss the implications, consequences, and downright dominant performances that take place on the biggest day of footy for the week. In this week's Spotlight, we are putting the Brisbane and the Western Bulldogs, good, bad and ugly, under the microscope. Queensland footy is off to a flyer and Gold Coast peeled away from North, and Clarko needs to shut up. The Dees are 0-5 and it's time to acknowledge their identity crisis. The Bombers youngsters stood up, as well as Dylan Shiel. And finally, the Blues are on the board and someone needs to give them love. So I guess that's my job. Let's do this and let's kick off this conversation at Norwood with a brilliant comeback for what seems to be the umpteenth time by the Brisbane Lions. So we can effectively script or book in what's going to happen in Brisbane games in 25 because it's going to be a reasonably competitive first quarter, a pretty second quarter if we're being honest, and then a second half comeback. It has seemingly happened every single time. The two that of course stand out the most are going to be the Geelong game and this one. And as we always do with these videos, starting with the winners, again, they were fantastic. Again, Jasper Fletcher is the most underrated player in the competition. I am going to be dying on this hill until someone that is not the Hardball Gets podcast, admittedly. Now, I went with it first, and I love those guys. But it's me and it's Nick Rinn, the only two that are just loving what Jasper Fletcher is bringing in at the moment, I should say. He is elite, this guy. And going back to halfback is doing wonders for him. The number 3, I know he's not the same as Michael Voss, but there's just a little bit of magic in that jumper that is just popping off the page for Jasper. But he and Darcy Wilmot as a combination, yes, you've still got the veteran composure of a Dane Zorko, of course you do. But those two youngsters off the back of the square are just humming at the moment. They've got a holy trinity of midfielders, as we know. Neil, McCluggage, Dunkley. You've still got the Ashcroft brothers that are rolling through there. But the elephant in the room is that forward line. Now, I did say in my preseason predictions that my big worry for Brisbane, and I think I've said it a lot this year, is how they're going to go without Joe. Now, I did say, admittedly, that the home and away season's not really going to be a problem, but I do want to acknowledge just how good it's looking at the moment. Yes, you've got guys like Calamar Cheese, Zach Bailey, Cam Rayner, who are going really well. And I was ready at halftime to be sitting down and writing, not the script, I suppose, but notes, thoughts on this game, and absolutely blasting Eric Hipwood. He had one disposal at halftime and looked about as engaged as a locked toilet door, to be completely honest. It wasn't great. And then he has that second half. Now, there are going to be times where he is going to need to do that. This was obviously one of them. This is not going to be what Eric brings forward, but what was more impressive was his ability to combine his aerial capacity in taking those contested marks along with his work at ground level. Normally, when he rips either a game or a couple of quarters apart, it's one or the other, and you just accept that the other one's not going to be as strong. Now, he's done it before at Gather Round against North Melbourne, I think it was, where he tore that game apart and was able to do both. He did it here. So maybe Brisbane getting disrespected and not being put at Adelaide Oval is going to be a good thing if Eric is just going to take the piss at Norwood or Mount Barker every year. Maybe that's the way to go. I'm not sure. But they were fantastic. Credit to them. The comeback's going to be a problem. It's actually something that I want to dive into a longer form video. The gist of it, I should say, at this point in time is it's not that big of a deal because it's successful. Now, I do think at some point this is going to stop. Like, it's not going to work. And from there, they'll need to adjust and their season will not really begin, but they'll be able to be challenged in some way, so that'll be good to see. But it's working for the moment. They're playing 2 really good quarters of footy. One 75% decent, 3 quarters of a good quarter, which is starting to get confusing. But if they're at a 10 out of 10 in third and fourth quarters, 7 out of 10 for the first quarter, that can kind of make up for a 2 or a 3 out of 10 in the second. They've got the ability to do that. And over to the Dogs. Yes, I understand when you give up a big lead, it's going to feel like shit, but they've been awesome for the start of the year. The way that they've been able to cope with injuries better than any other team in the competition, a side like Sydney struggling with their outs. The Bulldogs, not as much. I know they both lost this week, but I have utmost respect for what the Bulldogs have been able to do this year. A credit to them in a big way. And you got the dichotomy of what those injuries bring. Yes, you've got the youngsters who are up and about, got them going, and got that lead, but also not having those experienced players there when the momentum shifted means that they let it go, became a little bit of a defensive sieve, and once Brisbane had them in their sights, it seemed inevitable that they were going to go past them. But an awesome game of footy. Both teams deserve to have their stocks rise quite a little bit, I think, and we move on from there. So from one Queensland team winning to another, let's go to Gold Coast and North Melbourne. So the Suns at 4-0 and Brisbane actually 5-0 for the first time in their history, so shout out to them, I forgot to bring that up. But the Suns 4-0, and again, a pretty powerful performance. They're kind of not with the comeback element, I understand that, but the ability that 2.5 quarters in for things to be not going their way. The Roos did get a lead there and looked pretty damn good with ball in hand, and they just took over and had a gear that North couldn't go through. Now, the reason why in the intro that I said Clarko's got to shut up is whilst, yes, North ran out of gas and Gold Coast are more climatised to the kind of weather and temperature that was there, North should have been further in front. I'll talk about them a little bit more later on, but if the main complaint out of this performance was going to be the weather, then I wonder what the standards are going to be like at North, and I genuinely mean that. Because Gold Coast were awesome, went to another level, and it wasn't as though North were with ball in hand. And whilst, yes, they were struggling to run out the game, I understand that, they still looked dangerous with the ball. And where Gold Coast won this game is that when push come to shove, fitness came into play and momentum came into play because both teams had it for significant periods. One of them held up without the footy, and it was Gold Coast. North, with the ball, I think could be 9th or 10th best team in the comp. Without the ball, they're the second worst team in the comp, probably behind West Coast. It's astounding to me how quickly and easily an Alistair Clarkson coached team has very little defensive fundamentals without the ball. Now, I know part of it is going to be the list. I understand that. No one should be wanting Aiden Core and Griffin Logue to be your two key defenders. Charlie Comben was outstanding. Not denying that for a moment. But you can't understate why Ben Long and Jake Rogers and Ben Ainsworth were allowed to come up to the wing on their own and still be able to have uncontested marks in their forward 50. Because logic would tell you that if you let your opponent go up to half forward, you should be a spare in your defensive 50. And it didn't happen anywhere near enough. And I'm sorry, but Zach Fisher, Dylan Stevens are not good enough behind the ball to instill fear. Like Zach Fisher and Caleb Daniel can't operate in the same side. They're the same player. One just doesn't wear a helmet and is a few centimeters taller. But fundamentally, they play the same way. And off ball, Luke McDonald's actually been outstanding this year, especially in the last 3 weeks. Awesome. Everyone else down there, holy shit. And look, a club like Essendon has gotten a lot of crap for their development. But Colby McKercher was a pick 2, and Zane Dersma was a pick 4. And I know Dersma had an interrupted preseason, and I know he kicked a couple of snags, and I know that I loved him, so I've got a vested interest, I understand that. And McKercher was awesome last year, but their development looks like it's gone backwards as well. Tom Powell and Luke Davies-Uniacke were the best players pretty much on the ground for the first quarter and a half, and they didn't use the ball well at all. I don't give a shit what the disposal efficiency numbers say. Kicking the ball out in front of your teammate to get an efficient kick or an effective kick just for them to get tackled when it should have been an uncontested mark ain't good enough. It's as simple as that. And then, of course, for the Suns, you speak of the holy trinity of midfielders. Well, they've got the holy duo of Rowell and Anderson, and boy, they would be hoping that Matty Rowell goes nowhere. Now, Rowell's last quarters this year have not been great, like at all, but overall, their speed off halfback is awesome. I am tempted to do a how Gold Coast or a new-aged Richmond, and of course Dimmer being the common denominator. That's something that I'm thinking of putting together for this week. If I can try to get 2 videos out, like Monday, Wednesday, one of them is probably going to be that, so I'll sort of leave that there. But Joel Jeffrey is a seriously good footballer, and if you are underrating him, he is worth watching when you flick on a Gold Coast game, which is pretty cool. So, credit to Gold Coast. Queensland footy is humming. And from there, let's go to, well, the most underrated win all weekend that's going to be, because it's Carlton, for the reasons that you're probably thinking. So let's do that game. Seriously, Daz, do you know who they played? They only did it against West Coast. Daz, they played an under-18 side. I would do well against Witches' hats. Two things. One, this club lost to Richmond. And two, what's the alternative? They lose? What do you want from this club? And if it's Carlton that you just hate for the sake of hating them, then this conversation's not about you. Continue hating them. Good luck to you. You're like, I'm not saying you're right or wrong. Hating clubs is fun. I went through my entire teenage years wanting Geelong to burn to the ground. I don't want that now. I really don't. Even as the biased Hawthorn fan on Easter Monday, I'm not going to say the same thing. I love having that rivalry there. I know what it's like to hate footy teams, though. But here's the thing that I don't understand, is that we gave, rightly so, Carlton so much crap for losing to Richmond. Yet, they do this. And even on socials in the comments, it's... So, you don't play a bottom four side, everyone. You're not allowed to anymore. You can't play West Coast, you can't play North, you can't play Melbourne, it seems like now. You can't do it anymore, because no matter what you do, you're just going to cop shit for it. It's so backwards in terms of logic that it does my head in, really. Because, like I said, look, were they accurate? No. Were they perfect? No. But I said this about Carlton 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I stand by it in a massive way. The hardest win for them this year, after losing the Richmond game, was going to be their first one. And again, this wasn't pretty. It wasn't. It was a big win. They did what they needed to do, and they deserve credit for that. I think from here, it's going to look better. It's going to feel better. They're actually going to be able to play themselves into the season a little bit more. And I'm not giving up on the Blues. They ain't winning the flag. I think that's just common sense. But I'm not going out there and being like, they're a lock for bottom 6, for example. I'm not on that bandwagon in the slightest. In terms of who played well, it's always fun to see guys that have been maligned that step up. So Mitch McGovern is a really good example of this. Sam Walsh responded after copping a lot of criticism, some of it rightly so, some of it not. But it was good for him to get on the scoreboard in that first half. 18 disposals, 10 score involvements, and 3 goals is a hell of a first half. Corey Durden was able to kick 4. They're just crying out for a small forward. Jesse Motlop's year's been poo, to be honest. So Corey Durden getting on the scoreboard is awesome. And I just want to float this out there for you. If George Hewitt is not in your All-Australian starting midfield, you're wrong, and fix that immediately. He has been so good. He's been Carlton's best midfielder. And that includes a bloke that kicked 3 goals 3 and has won 2 Brownlows. And it's just a fact, though. I know all of these things are usually opinion-based, but there is no argument to be made that George Hewitt is Carlton's best midfielder or most informed midfielder right now. Now, what does this mean for the Eagles? Well, nothing new. Again, they're young. They're going to be hard to watch. I loved them dropping Tim Kelly. I love that selection statement. The only concern that I've got is, like, Harley aside, and Harley was good again. He didn't do a whole lot wrong, and it's completely obvious that he is going to be peaking, like, at his best in a good team, right? He is the icing, not the cake. Cam Rayner was also a number 1 draft pick who, let's be honest, is playing the exact same role and is the exact same archetype of player since he was drafted. I think he went to half-back for, like, a pre-season. But the half-forward that can mark overhead and kick goals. That's who he was when he was drafted. And that's what he is now. And as he's gotten bigger, stronger, fitter, and his teammates have gotten better, the exposed form he's able to bring has gone through the roof. And look how good he was in the prelim. And the grand final he played pretty well in as well. That's what I see with Harley. And that's what's going to be interesting if he comes back to Victoria. So Hawthorn, Geelong apparently are in the running for Harley. Again, speaking of long-form videos that I want to do, Harley to either of those teams is going to be something that I want to talk about, so I'm not going to spend too much time doing it here. To be honest, he's the second best read right now. Archer Reed has been bloody fantastic, and he deserves some credit as well. Ryan Marich continues to do what he does, especially if you've got him in your Supercoach team, and I think that is the longest anyone is going to spend talking about this game. Let's finish where Saturday finished, the Adelaide Oval, as Essendon go 2-2, and Melbourne get worse. Now, the Bombers were fantastic, I'm not denying that for a moment, and any win is a really good win, but I bet you, if I asked most Essendon fans, hey, you guys are going to win on the weekend, let's say I could guarantee that for you. Now, of course, we know that they did, so nothing wrong with that in the slightest, but what would you want to see out of it? And I can almost guarantee you that the answer was going to be still Zach Merritt being dominant, and look, he didn't use the ball all that well when he was tagged, and he really didn't use it all that well in the third quarter either, granted. But we want to see some of the maligned players stand up and do well. And the two that stand out in a massive way there, one being Ben Hobbs, who got a lot more midfield time. And I know this is going to be a foreign concept to some of us. Just kidding. Sarcasm. But drafting an inside midfielder and playing him as a majority inside midfielder got you good results. Well, fuck me. Who would have thought? Jesus. And the second one being Jai Menzie, who, one of the boys in the group chat, shout out to you, Jag, you're an absolute superstar, who is internally frustrated by Jai and, again, had to admit that this was fantastic to see. As it says there in the stats, he kicked 3 goals last year. He kicked 4 tonight, which is fantastic. Archie Roberts continued to impress. Sardale Hooley as the sub looked really good. And Sam Draper continues to give me the middle finger. I think I was more than vindicated in me ranking him really low in the ruck rankings heading into 24. I think it is awesome that in his free agency season, of course, now, this year, that he is going really well. 20 or more disposals for a ruckman, even though it's becoming more and more common. Draper isn't exactly the kind of ruckman you associate having those high-level numbers. You know, Tim English, Tom de Koning, Sam de Koning, when he played in the ruck, those kinds of players, Brodie Grundy, etc. Draper doesn't really fit that mold. Used Max as a step ladder, and I think he's going really well. If you didn't listen to his Fox Footy interview afterwards, the way he spoke about his contract, I love the honesty, I love the upfrontness, to be honest, but he didn't exactly say that he is dedicated to re-signing. The manager's going to have a chat. We'll try and get it all sorted out. $1.20, he'll be at the Crows next year, and he is an upgrade on Riley O'Brien. I just hope the Crows don't overpay a shitload, and they'll go from there. So what about the Dees? Well, it's the exact same. I did a video on Melbourne Media Madness where I found it hilarious how mainstream media who still had faith in this footy club with saying that it's an era over and really disappointing that this is the way that it went. But if you didn't have Melbourne in your top 8, then them not going that well is not that surprising to you. Now, granted, 0-5 is still a big shock. I'm not denying that for a moment. But a team that doesn't have a really a key forward or a hell of a lot of smaller options. Bailey Fritsch played his best game for the year, and Cozzy Pickett did really well to get his trade value up to probably a first and second round pick from the Dockers, by the way. So, granted, that's a good thing, I suppose, but the rest of their group is boring. Their veterans are just, yuck, at this point in time, mostly across the board. Petrarca is probably going to be at Collingwood next year. Oliver probably should have been traded to Geelong. They've got an interim president, an interim CEO, and a premiership coach that is probably already overstayed his welcome. It's a waste, is what it is, which sucks because, again, I love Melbourne's youth. I don't want to rehash all the points from that Melbourne Media Madness video, but their youth look really good. They're obviously going to carry this club forward. I'm not saying that they need to do a hard rebuild Richmond style. And look, just like Carlton, when you're 0-5 and when you're really struggling, the hardest win to have in the world is going to be your first one. Would it surprise me if they beat Freo next week? It actually wouldn't. But they're off my against the odds list. And seriously, speaking of against the odds, between you guys and the creators taking my picks is starting to do my head in, to be honest. Like, if I could have, I would have locked the Cats. I mean, the Swans wouldn't have worked for me, but it was the Cats or the Swans, and they were both taken off me. I thought I was clever by running the numbers against West Coast, and it went to shit. So, effectively, there it is. Massive credit to the winners. The Bombers were awesome. Brisbane were fantastic. Gold Coast were dominant for 2.5 quarters, and Carlton deserve credit, even though no one else will give it to them. A few of the losers will be licking their wounds tonight and throughout the week, hoping they can bounce back. Now, because Hawthorn are playing the late game tomorrow, I will do my reaction to the Hawks game afterwards, and hopefully 2 videos throughout the week. One of them will be more team-based, one of them will be more competition-based as to what they will look like. I'll keep you updated when I figure that out. Thank you so much for watching. I hope your weekend is going very well. Like the video if you like the video. Subscribe to join the Daz Talks Footy cohort. You're all absolute legends. I will see you in the next video. Go the Hawks for tomorrow. Goodbye.